This is John for MTG Nexus coming at you with a quick reaction video / discussion about today's ban restricted announcement, particularly for the modern format, or in the modern format's case, no announcement, as some people were expecting a format change, perhaps a banning of Lurrus, perhaps a banning of Ragavan, and we did have a discussion video about what we thought might happen, but here's the actual ban and restricted announcement. Changes to standard legacy and historic. Legacy, notably Ragavan and Nimble Pilfer getting banned. No changes to the modern format. In fact, throughout their article, there's not even a mention of the modern format. As far as why they discuss that Ragavan might need to go in Legacy is, although recent tournaments haven't been conclusive in terms of Delver, it's an over 56% win rate. Basically, it's too powerful with the extra disruption that's in the Legacy format. Could that possibly translate to the modern format at some point? So, historically, Wizards bans have taken one of two forms. Either a card is a part of a deck that is so overwhelmingly powerful and becoming the de facto best deck that they get rid of it, or there's some type of an annoyance with it in terms of the play patterns associated with it. So it can be too powerful in terms of how quickly it can execute a win, or it can be annoying in terms of, how long the play patterns last, or sometimes overwhelming consistency. If you look at the history of things Wizards has banned in Modern, which we'll get into in a second, most of it, they tend to be things that accelerate the pace of play, not necessarily things that are grindy, but there have been some exceptions to that in the past. As far as whether Wizards screwed up or not, still a lot of non-consensus as far as things go. Some people were happy, some people were sad. As far as a poll on our own channel, about 40% people think that Wizards got it right, about 60% people thought the Wizards got it wrong so far. But that said, let's take a look at the ban list and see, is there anything overtly that may have been able to come off of the ban list to make a change in addition to the bannings that people were discussing as a possible. So if you overall look at ban list for the modern format, it breaks down into enablers or powerful cards and things that are just outright broken. So as far as enablers, you have things like the artifact lands. You have Arkham's Astrolabe, which on a power level aren't that strong, but in terms of just allowing consistency and execution, some things were just too powerful. Birthing Pod, which we'll get back to in a minute. Blazing Shoal was a combo piece that I think, quite frankly, is a bit of a joke that's still on the thing, as Hammer Time really has Blazing Shoal in one card, so, Bridge from Below doesn't ever do anything positive. Chrome Mox is too fast. Cloudpost is Tron on Crack. Dark Depths is a land combo that can be difficult to mess with. Deathrite Shaman has an asterisk maybe beside it now, with Ragavan being consistently in the format. Dig Through Time, obviously a very powerful broken enabler. Dread Return, same thing, doesn't do anything fair or interesting. Eye of Ugin single-handedly made Eldrazi decks completely broken. Faithless Looting enables graveyard decks to be a little bit too consistent. You could argue this could come back at some point, but for right now it's still a little too powerful, especially with the reintroduction of new things. Feel the Dead just grinds people out too badly. Gataxian Probe, makes your deck smaller. One of the reasons why I argued for the possible banning of Mishra's Bauble. Glimpse of Nature is another card that might be able to come off the ban list. Golgari Grave Troll makes Dredge a little bit too powerful as far as how it digs. Grave Furnace, another artifact grand. GSC is certainly a card. Hogaak's never coming off. Hypergenesis, interesting design, but a little bit too powerful with Cascade decks already out there. Crackline Ironworks recently banned. Kind of annoying to play against. Can be a little bit too consistent. Maybe you could argue it should be back in the format with Mox Opal banned, but Mental Misstop is a little bit narrow, but it can be annoying. Lattice, people whine about the Lattice Lock. Oko, no. Once Upon a Time, once again, cheap enabler, no. Ponder and Preordain, you could argue that Preordain could come off the list. Punishing Fire, creature decks are already screwed enough. Rite of Flame and Seething Song both enable Storm, maybe. Could argue maybe one of those could come off the ban list as much as Storm's been neutered. Second Sunrise enables Egg Combo, just no. Sensei's Divining Top, very powerful in addition to enabling very long, drawn-out games. Simian Spirit Guide recently banned because it's a powerful enabler. Splinter Twin, people have its defenders. I still think it's a little too annoying, especially with all the other cards like Force of Negation that have been printed lately. Tybalt's Trickery, recent ban, no. Treasure Cruise, same reason. Dig Through Time, very cheap card advantage enabler. Tree of Tales, another artifact land. Jite, some people have argued its power level is sufficient for Modern right now, but really no reason to unban it. Uro, obviously a recent ban. Some people could say it could come back. Volatile Whispers, just no. And pretty much the list. Like I said, most of them enable either a ridiculous amount of consistency, faster mana production, or just enable broken strategies. So the cards, I would argue, you could conceivably bring back to the format. You could, Skull Clamp's definitely not. The cards you consider bringing back, Jite you could consider, maybe Preordain. Mystic Sanctuary, no, because it makes things too consistent once again. I could argue for Hypergenesis, although it may be a little bit too powerful. Glimpse of Nature, maybe help make decks like Elves a little bit more consistent, you could argue, but it does have a very high ceiling, so it is dangerous to unban. And then Birthing Pod. I think the card that single-handedly could have made the Modern format more interesting if they weren't interested in banning anything would be Birthing Pod. Now, obviously, unbanning Birthing Pod comes with a risk, just like unbanning Golgari Grave Troll did. This is a card that has potentially a very high ceiling. But the one thing that's severely lacking in the Modern format right now is creature-based decks. And I do think that they missed an opportunity here to unban Birthing Pod. Even if they said, we're going to unban this for 6 months and see what happens. Even if they put a caveat that said, this card's risky to unban. We're warning you now. If it gets too powerful, we're going to remove it from the format again. But I think people would have liked a little bit of a shakeup. Preordain, powerful cantrip that could make decks like Storm and Jeskai Ascendancy combo maybe a little bit more consistent in the face of all the nonsense that goes on in the format. Combo decks have been obviously, taking hit after hit after hit because they were a little too consistent. You had too many, turn one kills when you had Simian Spirit Guide in the format. So maybe it's time to give them back something. So I could easily have seen a format in which you return Preordain and Birthing Pod to the format just to give you a more mid-rangey, kind of feel. And obviously Birthing Pod would give creature decks a reason not to run Lurrus of the Dream Den in particular. Would that have solved the problem people have with the format? Not really. I think we're going to do a future video about the problems Modern currently suffers from. Modern's still an awesome format. I still enjoy playing it myself. Obviously, it's still the primary thing that I do content on. Modern Horizons 1 and Modern Horizons 2 have started to make Modern feel more and more like Legacy Light in terms of expensiveness of decks, card availability. While the format is very good, don't get me wrong, it is starting to get priced out of a lot of people. Banning a Ragavan, banning a Lurrus, might have helped that a little bit, especially Ragavan, but, you still have the Elementals, you still have, Ren and 6, you still have a lot of cards that are from those two sets in particular that are among the most expensive in the format. They're almost essential to many decks. There's very few decks that can't play them. And even a deck like Burn, has Modern Horizons 1, the Canopy Land that I can't remember off the top of my head, the red-white Canopy Land is from that set and it's starting to get a little bit pricey too. So, you're starting to get to the point where Modern's getting pricey. And, maybe that's part of the thing behind the banned and restricted list. And the other thing is the format's very diverse. It's stale, but it's diverse. So Wizards has very little incentive to make a change to the format. Other than, maybe people will start to wane interest in it. Maybe that'll cause something like Pioneer to pick back up again. But a lot of people forget part of the reason why Pioneer had such a big surge behind it is Modern at that point in time was in a pretty rough place. I think that was before Uro's banning, that was before Simian Spirit Guide got banned, and some other stuff. I can't remember, looting maybe too? Can't remember exactly what cards weren't around then, but Modern was in a pretty rough place then, and a lot of people were very angry at the Modern format, and I think that's why Pioneer got part of the reason why Pioneer got such a big push. The gate is so many people were just tired of the format that Modern had become at that point in time. And while I don't think Modern's quite at that point now, between the lack of organized play, the expensiveness of decks, and such, people are starting to look for alternatives, and a lot of people are just walking away from the format or the game in general. And I think Wizards has to be very careful with, how they handle things moving forward. A third card you could consider unbanning would be Deathray Shaman, although I do think that one has a higher meh side to it. I think the printing of Ignoble Hierarch kind of fits a lot of what Deathray Shaman did in terms of the colors that it served, other than obviously, the extra abilities Deathray Shaman had. It would be an interesting counter to Ragavan. The problem is some decks could run that in addition to Ragavan. There are some cards Wizards could consider unbanning. The format overall is pretty decent, but I do think it has its issues, and we will cover those in a separate video. But overall, I think Wizards missed a large opportunity to improve the format, whether it was by a banning of some type, or maybe an unbanning of, a card like Birthing Pod and Preordain perhaps. Maybe give a little bit more power to the format to other decks that are kind of suffering. Those are my thoughts on the ban and restricted announcement. I think Wizards did miss an opportunity here to shake things up in a positive direction a little bit. I do think unbans might have actually served more than banning. I do think at some point, though, that Lurrus and Ragavan are both going to bite it, but whether it's in the next 6 months to a year, who the heck knows. But thanks for tuning in. This has been John for MTG Nexus. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this kind of content, especially for the modern format.